November 1942. The biting winds of the California high desert swept across the Manzanar Relocation Center, carrying dust and hushed whispers through the perimeter of barbed wire. Inside the drafty confines of Barrack 14, 4 Japanese-American women huddled around a small table, their breath misting in the frigid morning air. There was Ako Tanaka, formerly a respected professor at Berkeley, who had become their unofficial anchor. Beside her sat Yukio, a compassionate nurse, Micho, the sophisticated wife of a diplomat, and young Emiko, a newlywed painfully separated from her husband. In these long, monotonous months of captivity, they had found their only warmth in one another's company. "Did you hear what the guards were saying yesterday?" Yukio whispered, her voice barely rising above the howling wind outside. Ako nodded grimly, recounting a conversation she had overheard. She had listened as Sergeant Murphy discussed special preparations for the coming week, speaking in low tones about portion sizes and making arrangements that would have to last the entire week. Another guard had laughed cruelly, remarking that it was more than these people had seen in months. The women exchanged glances heavy with dread. In their experience, special arrangements rarely boded well. Every change they had endured thus far had meant tighter restrictions or smaller rations. "How much less can they give us?" Emiko asked, her wedding ring now sliding loosely on her thinning finger. Their daily food allowance was already barely enough to sustain them. Ako, who had spent years analyzing English literature, wrestled with the guards' words. But every survival instinct she possessed screamed of deprivation. Immediately, the women implemented a desperate strategy. They began hoarding meager scraps from their meals, a slice of crust, a spoonful of rice, hiding them away in a heartbreaking defense against the hunger they believed was coming. Micho noted the date, reminding them of the American Thanksgiving holiday, a celebration of abundance. The irony left a bitter taste in their mouths. Emiko could not fathom the cruelty of starving them during a holiday. "Perhaps that is exactly the point," Micho mused quietly, "to remind us of what we have lost and what we can never have again." As the days passed, the activity within the camp surged. The kitchen staff appeared busier than usual, and delivery trucks arrived with greater frequency. Even the demeanor of the guards shifted. They seemed almost cheerful. Sergeant Murphy was even heard whistling while on patrol. To the women, these signs were ominous. "They must be stockpiling for themselves," Yukio observed darkly, "while they prepare to starve us." The night before Thanksgiving, sleep proved impossible. In the darkness of the barrack, memories flooded in. Emiko thought of her grandmother's beautiful meals. Yukio remembered her mother's secret miso soup recipe. Micho recalled the elaborate dinners at the embassy. Food had once been a connection to culture, to love, and to family. Now, it was reduced to a cold calculation of survival. In the quiet, Ako offered words of encouragement. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said, "we will face it together." Yet, in her heart, she felt a profound uncertainty about the ordeal the morning would bring. Thanksgiving morning dawned clear and biting cold. At 0800 hours, the familiar crunch of boots approached their door. But instead of a gruff command to assemble for work, there was a gentle knock. Sergeant Murphy's voice came through, surprisingly soft. "Ladies, could you please come with us? We have something special planned for today." Hearts pounding, the women gathered their few possessions and followed, steeling themselves for a transfer or a punishment. Instead, they were led toward the main mess hall, a place usually strictly regimented. As they walked, they noticed other prisoners, men, women, and even children being escorted in the same direction. The guards seemed unusually relaxed, exhibiting a strange friendliness. Sergeant Murphy even held the door open for them, an unprecedented act of courtesy that left them bewildered. Inside the hall, they stopped dead in their tracks, unable to process the scene before them. The mess hall had been transformed. Long tables, covered in crisp white cloth, stretched across the room. On them lay more food than any of them had seen since the outbreak of war. Golden roasted turkeys glistened under the lights. Platters of steaming vegetables, fresh breads, and tempting desserts lined the tables. The rich, complex aroma hit them like a physical force, making their mouths water instantly. "This can't be real," Yukio breathed, her medical training leading her to wonder if malnutrition was inducing hallucinations. Colonel James Mitchell, the camp's stern commander, stood at the front of the room. "Today is Thanksgiving," he announced, his voice projecting clearly. "A day when we traditionally gather to give thanks for our blessings and share a feast." The colonel paused, looking out at the faces of the internees. "Many of you are far from family. The circumstances are difficult, but even in times of war, we must remember our shared humanity." Akko translated the words for the others, though they barely registered against the visual shock. "This meal," Mitchell continued, gesturing to the bounty, "is our way of recognizing your dignity as human beings. We hope you will join us in this tradition of gratitude and fellowship," Emiko whispered. "Is this some kind of test?" Eiko replied honestly. "I don't know. But if it is genuine, refusing would be an insult. If it is a test, our best response is dignity." Slowly, hesitantly, they took their seats. American guards and kitchen staff began to serve generous portions: turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, green beans, and cranberry sauce. There were even bowls of rice prepared in a familiar style, and vegetables seasoned with soy sauce, a thoughtful concession to their tastes. When Akko's plate was filled, she stared down in disbelief. It was a larger meal than she had seen since her arrest. She took her first bite of turkey, and the flavor exploded across her palate with an intensity that nearly brought her to tears. It had been so long since she had tasted properly cooked, seasoned meat. The atmosphere in the room slowly shifted. The initial tension evaporated, replaced by cautious appreciation. Conversations sparked to life, and for the first time in months, the sound of children laughing filled the air. Sergeant Murphy approached their table, a coffee pot in hand. "More coffee, ladies?" he asked, his usual gruff demeanor replaced by something approaching warmth. "This is really good turkey," he added. "Our cook, Mrs. Henderson, has been preparing for this meal for weeks." Micho suddenly understood what we overheard, she murmured to the others. They weren't talking about reducing rations. They were preparing this feast. Akko realized the depth of her misinterpretation, the tone, the context, all viewed through the lens of fear. "Why would they do this for us?" Emiko asked, struggling to comprehend the generosity. "We are their enemies," Yukio replied softly. "Maybe they don't see us as enemies. Maybe they see us as people caught up in circumstances beyond our control, just like they are." Colonel Mitchell then visited their table, addressing Emiko directly. He spoke of his own daughter, a nurse serving in the Pacific, and expressed his hope that she would receive kindness if she were ever in such a situation. "Even in the darkest times," he concluded, "there can be moments of light." The colonel's words struck Emiko deeply, and she fought back tears. The realization that this man could see her as someone's daughter rather than a faceless prisoner was overwhelming. Later, as they carried generous leftovers back to their barrack, their worldviews had been fundamentally challenged. "Everything I believed about this place, about these people, has been turned upside down," Emiko confessed. Micho replied thoughtfully. "Maybe our beliefs were based on incomplete information, just as theirs probably were about us." Back in the barrack, sharing turkey and pie, Yukio reflected on the colonel's daughter. "It made me realize he probably worries about her the same way my parents worry about me. Ako, who had dedicated her career to bridging Japanese and American cultures, felt a resurgence of the American ideals she had studied. "I had begun to think America was just propaganda," she said slowly. "Maybe both versions are true," Micho suggested. "Capable of great kindness and great cruelty, depending on the circumstances." In the days that followed, the camp atmosphere subtly shifted. Regular rations became more generous. The kitchen staff remained friendly, and the women began to see their guards as individuals. Ako found herself writing carefully worded letters to her family in Japan, describing unexpected moments of light and the capacity for kindness in the enemy. She was not the same person who had woken up that Thanksgiving morning. That single meal had created a crack in the wall of their assumptions. They remained prisoners, but they were no longer the people who had prepared for starvation based on fear. They had learned a profound lesson about the complexity of human nature, the possibility of kindness in unexpected places, and the power of dignity to transform even the most difficult circumstances. This lesson of grace in the darkest of times would shape their lives long after they left Manzanar. It was a lesson none of them would ever forget. If you were moved by this incredible story of unexpected humanity during wartime, please like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps us bring you more powerful historical stories like this one. If you haven't already, subscribe and ring the notification bell to join our journey through history.